Good evening, everybody.
Hello. There's Marie. Hey, Marie. My podcast with you as the guest went live today. Yay!
Nice. Excellent.
It's called Flappers Family and Community with Marie Prosser. It's really interesting.
Cool. Excellent. So good to be here, everybody. Good to be back with you guys, and excited to talk themes and more pre-production ideas. We spent a lot of time talking about men last time. We'll get to the elves more tonight. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I think we're pretty much ready to start. Dave, we're hoping Dave is going to make it. Dave is still in bedtime transition, so I think it sounds to me like Dave made the classic blunder of bragging about how successfully he had shifted Wally's bedtime, perhaps prematurely, as I think Wally struck back tonight is the impression I was getting. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah, exactly. Never brag about parenting, says Nick. See, exactly, Nick. It's said. Pretty soon. It doesn't take too long to catch on to that principle. Okay. Anyway, I hope that Dave will join us. We'll keep an eye on the attendees list and bring him in if he comes. But I think we should. We don't want to keep everybody waiting forever here. So let's go ahead and get started. Lots to talk about. Are you ready to bring us in?
Was that my cue?
Well, it's a cue.
I'm sitting here staring at the slides. It's like, oh, I think he's talking to me. Okay.
That's fine.
Take my time. All right. Here we go. All right. Pausing for the convenience of the editor. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all around the world. Gosh, I feel like I should have that deep, right. The background. This is Trish Lambert, and you have landed at the Silmarillion Film Project. I'm here with my co-host, or I'm actually his co-host, Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor. We're hoping our third host, Dave, will show up. Hopefully he will. And we're here for season 5, episode session 2. We're talking still pre-production. Tonight is about theme and pacing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not quite to the point where we're going to be outlining episode by episode what we want to happen all through the season, but we're going to be first focusing on the big issue, sort of major themes that we want to be focusing on and developing over the course of the season. We've been that's something that's kind of sort of naturally happened over the years, that we've found particular themes emerging, and we've been more kind of deliberate about that recently, to be thinking about that in advance so we can have it in mind as the story's developing. Last season I thought that worked really, really well. I was very happy with our theme for last season. So we're going to be thinking about that. Then we're going to be coming back to some of the major plot lines that there are some kind of really big picture issues that we need to discuss. And in particular, the two I am most interested to talk about are Fingolfin and Aredhel. We didn't get to either one of them really last time. And I find in different ways, both of them are very difficult. In fact, privately, I kind of think, or rather I have been thinking for some time, that figuring out how to handle Fingolfin in this season is something I won't say dreading, because I really like the Fingolfin story, but I've been anticipating it because I expect it to be challenging. I expect it to be difficult. I think that it's one that seems to me harder than it seems at first, right? It's easy to read the story and be kind of drawn into this, like the amazing and inspiring dynamics of his duel with Morgoth, right? But as soon as I try to kind of put it into the big picture and really think through Fingolfin's character and Fingolfin's character arc, the harder I find it, really, to think through. So we're going to do that. We're going to think about those two characters and some other stuff. I think the question of we're probably going to end up talking about some big picture Gondolin stuff in the context of Aredhel. That's going to, so we need to, we did some good work last season in figuring out how we were going to push the Gondolin story, like what the core narrative of Gondolin was, and we're going to need to continue pushing that in various ways. So then, of course, we're hoping to get to beginning to hash out some concepts of how we want to divide up the season, how much time we're going to want to spend on different elements of this chunk of plot here. So anyway, that's what we have in store here tonight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. First, just a couple quick announcements. This is a light announcement day. Some weeks it's like we have a billion things, and only a couple things this week. One I wanted to mention, our Anytime Audit Quarantine Special. There are many, many people who have taken advantage of the Quarantine Special. It's been delightful to see the Anytime Audit registrations, which is just basically you're able to audit the class, sit in on all the lectures asynchronously. These are all recorded lectures for anything in our course catalog. That's available for any time audit. You can get access to it at a special rate. We've sort of opened that up here while a lot of people have extra time and are looking for good productive things to do. Certainly auditing, a brilliant course taught by like Tom Shippey or Verlin Flieger is an excellent way to, or Amy Sturgis, excellent way to invest some time here during the time of isolation. And, of course, also wanted to mention Signum's online teaching mentorship program. It's a program we just began a couple weeks ago. A lot of people dealing with online teaching, struggling with online teaching, kind of thrust into it for the first time. And we're here to help. We've been doing a lot more of this lately. I'm making plans for a mentorship session I'm running next Wednesday, with a university down in North Carolina. So it's a time when a lot of, especially now that there was a time when many schools were really kind of hoping that the shutdown would only be for a couple weeks, right? And it's kind of becoming clearer and clearer to people that it's going to be longer than that. So just want to encourage anyone who's struggling. We do individual mentorship and group mentorship. And the concept of the mentorship is very simple. It's just not just thinking about the mechanics of like how do you get online and run a class, but really thinking about pedagogy and curriculum. It's just not the same. Online teaching is a wonderful tool. There's so many opportunities, so many things you can do, but they're not the same. There are different sets of advantages and disadvantages. And so people who have never done it before, it's hard to figure out. I mean, it takes a lot of trial and error to figure out what stuff is going to work well, what doesn't work well. How can I take my curriculum and my teaching goals and figure out how can I better achieve those, in the kind of the new system I'm going to have to use in going online. And so, at Signum, we've been doing this and we've experienced 10 years of trial and error. So we're happy to help people think that through. So anyway, that's what our mentorship program is. So if you or your school district or your school, or, you think this is something your department chair should know about or something like that, please do go and check out signumuniversity.org/mentorship. We would be happy to help. All right.
Dave Kale's here.
And Dave Kale has come just in time. All right, let's bring in Dave Kale. Hang on, Dave. I unmuted you, but let's do better than that. Let's actually make it so that you can see the questions as well. And Dave Kale came, as Nick says. Absolutely. Hey, Dave.
That's right. Dave Kale came.
That's right. Welcome.
Which day of Passover is this? Is this something we can connect to Passover?
What, Dave's Advent?
On the fourth evening, Dave Kale came.
Right, yes. You're right, Stephen. He did arrive precisely when he meant to. Right after the announcement. So we're just ready to talk about the theme, Dave.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Although the mentor program sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it's been great. We're connecting with a really diverse group of people. We're just in the past over the course of this week, we're mentoring with both a four-year university in North Carolina and with a community language and ESL teaching organization in Phoenix. So, very different groups of people experiencing very, different challenges and trying to figure out how to do what they normally know how to do really well online. It's been fun. So, all right. So, theme. We got a bunch of different suggestions, and we do have sort of some challenge, as our notes suggest here, some challengingly divergent plot lines, a lot of sort of separate things. We had a bunch of people. In some ways, the theme for season 4 was kind of easy. It kind of suggested itself, since one of the primary themes that connected so many of the events that were going on in season 4 was the question of suspicion and trust and distrust and the conflict and reconciliation. So the whole idea of forgiveness and reconciliation is the theme of season 4. Was not hard in a lot of ways. This is, I think, harder, and I don't have as clear an idea. One of the things that, so when I think about kind of I get trying to sort of back up and look at the big picture of this season, like I was just talking about with season 4, there are a couple things that we notice, right? One of the major things, of course, that's happening, as we discussed last time, is the arrival of the men. So the questions of mortality are one obvious issue that's going to come up, right? And not only questions of mortality and immortality, but the questions of just the whole difference in outlook and perspective, right? The ways in which the arrival of the men and the elves' interactions with the men is going to kind of challenge the status quo in some sort of fundamental ways, right? Like they don't look at the world in the same way. And so in as much as the elves are connecting with the men and associating with the men, a lot of the sort of assumptions that they're going to be making are going to be challenged, right? So again, it's not just about death in the sense that the men die of old age and the elves don't. But of course, the ways in which that fact, the divergence of the fates of the two children, the two groups of the children of Iluvatar, impact, and inform the way that they look at the world. And so showing how those two things interact, that's certainly a thing that's going to be happening a lot of the time in season 5. So we could think about something in those directions for a theme. When I ask, another answer to the question of what's like some of the major thing, like what's one of the, another one of the major issues of this season. This is our first big downward turn, really. I mean, I look, the kinslaying was a pretty big downward turn. I'm not trying to say it wasn't, but things have been going reasonably well, right, in Beleriand so far. The Dagor Bragollach is really good. I mean, remember, that's the thing which is going to inspire the sentence, war ceased completely, never again after this time, right? I mean, there's not going to be a real time of peace again in Beleriand. So that's what I mean when I say, like, it's not exactly like we've reached the pinnacle, but of course, with the way that we handled season 4, right? Yes, we had the Glaurung thing, but even the Glaurung thing can be sort of spun as, I mean, it was a victory, right? And certainly someone like Fingolfin is going to spin it as evidence that the siege is working, right? And that the siege is viable. So it's all good, right? And of course, we ended with like the moving into beautiful Gondolin, right? And everything is going according to plan there. And we ended with the wedding, right? I mean, we had all these happy notes that we ended season 4 on. But it's going to be a pretty steady downhill grade from here. There are going to be individual high points, right? Though none of them untouched by tragedy. But the Dagor Bragollach is really the beginning of the downward slide as far as the cheerfulness of the plot is concerned. So thinking about things like loss, thinking about things like that Seeds of Evil, of course, inspired by the by that line, that metaphor used in the Maegwyn story, thinking about things like division and stuff. That's all of that seems like that could certainly also be relevant. So. Yeah. Maria's saying that she thinks that the mortality thing seems to lean towards both loss and the activity versus waiting. And that, that is one way of capturing what I was describing. That is the human versus elvish point of view, right? Where the elves are content to let things be. I mean, there's the, I agree, Oakwig. That sentence, that phrase, "a dark seed of evil was sown," right? He says it gives him chills every time. Yeah, totally agree. It's a wonderful, wonderful line. Very powerful image. Anyway, I do. I think that's a good way of thinking. It's a good way of thinking about the sort of, I don't know what, cultural, psychological, spiritual differences, motivational differences between elves and humans. But I think there's more to it than that. Or rather, I'm not convinced that that's going to fit perfectly for the season as a whole. There are elements of that. I mean, that's going to come up. There will be some people who are like, let's just holding pattern. We're good, right? Things are good. Let's just focus on having things be where they are. And some who are going to be like, no, let's do things. Let's go out and get them. And we certainly will see differences between the human point of view and the elven point of view when it comes to that. But I have a hard time accepting that as like the dominant theme of the whole season, mostly because we're going to get divisions even among the elves. That we need to have divisions even among the elves as far as what we do. I mean, there will be some who are going to be like, hey, the leaguer is working. Let's just keep it up. No need to change anything. And there are going to be some who are going to be saying, no, we need to act. It's not okay. We cannot be content with the status quo. We have to move forward. So one could say, well, that just means taking this theme and not just simplifying it, along racial lines. Okay. Perfectly fine for us to do that. Anyway, I'm not sure. One of the things, probably one of these themes that I find most interesting, and Rhiannon, I think it was your suggestion, and I hadn't been thinking about it at all, but once you suggested it, I thought it was a really, really interesting idea. And that's the idea of change, this unexpected change. One of the things, it gets stated a couple times, but it's one of those things, like, I remember like reading over that line when I was younger and just like not getting it, or not like taking it literally, right? And that is the reference to the fact that the years of the sun wear differently than the years before the sun. That is, once the sun rises, the passage of time, change happens faster in Middle-earth after the rising of the sun. It's not just that change appears to arrive faster, or, gosh, time flies when the sun is going up and down, right? Like doesn't it seem only yesterday? Like, it's not just like literally something changes in the atmosphere, in Middle Earth is different after the rising of the sun, and change happens more quickly. That's a thing in Tolkien's world. And it would be interesting to me to see, I don't know if we could really adapt that concept, the concept of change, of the inevitability of change. And with it, I think, the inevitability of loss and of decline, that things that are great and beautiful in their beginnings wear and fade and wither in Middle-earth. So we can get loss, finding, meeting, and losing. We could get that plays into the acting versus waiting, the activity versus inactivity idea. Those who are kind of more in tune with this rapidity of change, right? Who recognize that, the time is something to be, seized, right? It needs to be seized. We can't just live the kind of life that the elves were living in Valinor, right? Because it's just not like that anymore.
And the other thing I think that this theme would work for is we see men in this episode, this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's changed. That's literally before the elves' eyes. Andreth, great example. We've got her young, we've got her middle-aged, we've got her old. They, for the first time, are seeing other beings change, and for elves, rapidly changing.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So,
and
that alone.
Right, and I wonder if that could be used as a mechanism essentially to draw their attention to it. I mean, like, the first reaction I would think of the elves to that would be like, wow, they're sure different. Right? Like, that didn't happen to us. Like, it's a good thing we don't have to go through that. Like, phew. But then, of course, as they realize, actually, no, we might not be, going gray and dying of old age like the men are, but we, in fact, we also are subject to this, to this change. Like, this isn't just men, right? This is something that is intrinsic to Middle Earth under the sun.
Well, and that could be the arc of the season, actually, is the elves being, kind of completely ignorant of that, they, like you were saying, they don't, by the end of the season, they're like, well, gosh, it's not just them that are changing. We actually are too. I mean, that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, it is. It's a big moment in the history of, elves in Middle Earth. Now, Stephen, Stephen, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. How many syllables is it? I feel like I'm playing charades. How many syllables? No, but seriously, I'm not sure. I want to make sure I pronounce your last name correctly because we have another Stephen in class tonight, so I don't want to confuse people. The 4 syllables. So
four. He said 4.
Horiyuchi? Is that? So I wasn't sure how to pronounce that first I. Anyway, okay. So as Stephen Horiyuchi says, we have yes. In a sense, they could have, or maybe should have noticed this change last season. But I actually kind of think it's cool to introduce it, not in the first season after the sun rises, but in the second season after the sun rises. Because one of the things they will be realizing retroactively is that this is something that has been happening all along, right? But they didn't really notice. They weren't really focused, especially since in season 4. Season 4 is all about, remember all the building that happened in season 4, right? We're about constructing things. We're about establishing things. So to some extent, that change happened is something like they were brand new. They had to set up kingdoms. They had to set up cities. They had to establish relationships. So of course things were changing because there had been displacement. There had been disruption, right? So one of the things that could be happening in this season is the elves saying like, okay, essentially, not that they literally say this, but, the perspective would be, okay, so we knew that things kind of had to change in order to, it changed for the Sindar because the Noldor arrived. It changed for the Noldor because they were, moving house and many other things besides that, right? And there were conflicts and issues, but there could still sort of be the assumption that once the dust settles, right? Once we've moved in and kind of gotten everything broken in around here, in Beleriand, that we're going to sort of settle back into a nice, tranquil, elvish pace of life, like Valinor. And that's the goal, right? The goal is to establish realms here that would be like the realms in Valinor. Even the Leaguer can fit within that picture, because, of course, Valinor has walls. Valinor is, if not actively under siege, prepared for a siege, right? That's why you have the Pelori. So, the idea that we built those defenses and then we're trying to build a kind of a little blessed realm under, below it, south of it, fine.
I could see why the elves would miss this last season. Yeah. Because as you're saying, they're the changers. Last season, they were the changers. So their focus is on, they're the agents of change. They're unaware. They, like you said, they're the ones doing the change. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're the ones doing all the changing. And like you say, oh yeah, well, when this is all done, we'll just go back to the way it was, kind of thing. Yeah, so you're right.
Yeah. And so if, and Stephen, you're absolutely right. Again, Turgon is like the poster child for the one extreme end of this spectrum, right? The one who is most focused on not changing, building his hermetically sealed kingdom as a replica of Tyrion. Right? So if there's anyone among the elves who's trying to go back to a Valinorian status quo, it's Turgon, right?
Which again, may be part of the issue Aredhel has.
Exactly, that opens that up pretty clearly, right? If that is the point of if that is one element anyway of the if Aredhel, we had already talked about the idea that Aredhel's departure eventually was not going to be just about discontent, but rather about insight, right? That Gondolin is failing of its office. If she was sold, we had her sold on that by Turgon in season 4 as Gondolin is like, this is I'm on a message. I'm on a mission from God, right? I'm on a mission from Olmo, right? To set this up. And it's going to be a critical element here in the preservation of our people. Like it's going to you'll be playing an important role, right, in the defense of the people and our lands and everything else, and this whole league and alliance that we have set up. But once he's there, once he's in Gondolin, that begins to kind of turn inwards increasingly, right? And so that he ceases to think, more and more, he ceases to think about the others outside, and instead, increasingly, just thinks about Gondolin itself as not a means, but an end. Right. Now, obviously, we can't make that shift happen too quickly and too absolutely with Turgon. We need to give him a while before he really gets there to the point where he's refusing the messenger from Olmo. And we've got a number of seasons before he gets there. But Aredhel can see it coming. Right. It's not happened yet, but she can see it coming. So I do think that kind of opens that up. So if she's more sensitive to the fact that, like, you know what? No, like it's not just, it is impossible for us to try to recreate that tranquil, unchanging Valinorian ever-noon experience, right? Like, that's not going to happen here in Middle-earth. But more, we shouldn't be trying to do that. Like, that's not the point of what is happening here. We're missing the plot if that's our goal. And so I can see that. I can see that working. The other end of the spectrum, among the elves, I mean, not counting the humans, because again, all of the humans are. I don't think there are going to be any of the humans who are going to be on the Turgon side of the scale exactly, right? But of the elves, the one who is, I think, on the furthest extreme away from Turgon has got to be Maedhros. Right? Because if anyone has changed, if anyone has experienced the reality of how life in Middle-earth changes you, it's Maedhros. He has experienced change, right? And also is invested by his experience in his imprisonment on Thangorodrim. He's the only one of the elves who has something like this kind of urgency, right? An almost human-like urgency to do things and get them done, and lead the war on Morgoth. Good. Nick, that's a great point. Nick points out that the elves, the way that the elves take in the humans, there's even like a sense of giving into the Valinorian impulse, right? The way in which, for many of the elves bringing the humans into the elven realms, it's like the Valar bringing the elves into Valinor, right? Not all of them are thinking that way, but for some of them, I think that we can make a lot out of that parallel, right? And that can be one of the points of debate, right? That this is not about welcoming our junior cousins into our own little, second-rate blessed realm, our mostly blessed realm, our partially blessed realm, right? But rather, these are allies and friends, right?
I was thinking about your point, Trish, about the difference between season 4 and season 5, because it's not like things weren't changing, but that in season 4, the elves were kind of more the agents of change, and the difference this season is that now things are kind of changing around them. And I was thinking, like, I can't really I can't really articulate it very well, but that really is an important point that like it's quite different when, like, I think especially for elves, I think like the quintessential experience of the elf is that like if you don't do anything, nothing happens in some sense. Like you know that if the elves are kind of just sitting back, then like the world doesn't change around them, and like especially with the arrival of the men, that's what really changes. Like now, like if they sit back and do nothing, like things continue on and actually change quite rapidly without them being even involved.
Right.
And you're right. Like there's something like there's definitely a sea change or a phase shift of like the way the story works. And if you really think about like all of the major events that are about to follow, you know, like that all and that in which men are a catalyst in each one of those, Baron and Luthien and Turin and Tur and all those. Like it's pretty, like when you look at it from that point of view, it's like kind of like this is such an interesting and exciting point in the story.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Brian Dimmock makes a really interesting point. He said, you know, you could argue that this is the point in the whole larger story, when the elves move from being the primary agents of action to reacting to events and declining and trying to prevent things changing. And even, I would say, of course, in the latter extremes, escaping. Right, just isolating themselves and letting the world change around them as they like hold on to their sheltered enclaves, which they try to protect from change as much as possible. Right, and obviously we're not talking about flipping a switch in this season, you know, between those things. And obviously there are going to be many examples of elves who do act, right? Elves who do not go in that direction that Brian was just describing. But I agree with him. That is something we see of elves a lot of the time, right? That is a major theme, and is, I think, definitely one that certainly increases as we go forward. That's why I find this suggestion, it's in some ways, when I start off just kind of looking at the list of suggestions that folks on the discussion boards made, and again, I think they're all really interesting suggestions. The change didn't strike me as like an obviously compelling theme for season 5, but the more I've thought about it, I'm like, this is actually really interesting. And because it enables us to do almost all of the rest of these things, right? To show, yeah, again, like, you know, death and mortality, opportunities for like learning and understanding, for both learning about like, are we going to adapt or are we not going to adapt? I mean, this is a big question for elves anyway, right? Are they going to hold on? Are they just going to turn inward, or are they going to be willing to interact with the world that's changing around them? Again, the reality of loss and decline. I mean, there's lots of things.
I wonder if this idea of the elves kind of being at heart wanting to preserve and not change, you know, get things the way they want to not change, because that's what we're seeing in the Third Age also. That's what we're seeing in the Third and Fourth Age, you know, that's kind of how they are. And we continue to see it. And that may be something we want to keep in mind, that that's kind of their ground of being through the whole entire saga,
right?
Is their tendency to want to retain and conserve and keep in amber, if you will.
Yeah, agreed. And I do. So Brian was also just saying that, of course, one possible problem with choosing change as the theme is that it's going to apply to a lot of future seasons, and we run risk of overusing it. I do think, though, in my mind, that's almost a good reason to use it, because when we do have sort of important moments of change later on, we can be... So on the one hand, when you look back at the themes that we have been developing over the course of the first 4 seasons, it's not like any of them have ceased to be relevant, right? We have built off those as we go through. You know, the importance of the, you know, the establishment of the Valar working together. Yeah, it really is cumulative, right? And, you know, the initial divisions between, you know, Melkor's folks and Manwë's folks, and the problems that were happening back in season 1. Well, nothing's changed, right? That those are still the issues in a lot of ways, and we can see how the concerns that we highlighted in season 1, have set the stage for for everything that has come after. The question of Elven home in season 2, that is the fundamental question of season 2. Where do elves belong? What is the purpose of elves? It's another way I might characterize the theme of season 2 was like purpose, calling, like destiny. Like what are you for? As well, okay, it's. I think Shagrat who says that, so I don't necessarily want to quote him, but anyway,
as a famous orc once said.
As a famous orc once said, "What are you for?" Anyway, yeah. So that question of what is the purpose, what is the calling of the elves, where do they belong, what is their function, what is their role? Again, that is still a question which people are they're trying to figure out still.
Right.
The question of rebellion, relationship with authority, and so we got between from Feanor. In the his oration under Torchlight in Tyrion in episode 1, leading to the kinslaying, all the way down to the problems between the people of Fingolfin and the people of Feanor, down by the end. I mean, that's again obviously something, the Oath of Feanor, something that is still with us and will be for some time. Reconciliation obviously is going to be, forgiveness and reconciliation, lots of opportunities for the deployment of those ideas as we move forward too. So again, that we'd be bringing up something that is going to kick off a trend and that we're going to want to come back to a lot is, to me, a positive sign that possibly we're onto something here. But it also just seems to me as such a key idea in Tolkien's world, and we kind of need to bring it up soon, right? This whole idea of like, now that the sun is up, things are different, right? The idea of the change under the sun is, I think it's not too soon to, and might soon be too late to really be reflecting back about that. It's one thing to say they didn't notice it in season 4 because of the reasons we've already talked about. It's another thing to say that, like, by season 7, they're going to be like, hey, have you noticed that, like, things are kind of different around here? It might just be the fact that we're all getting slaughtered every, few decades, but I think there's something else to it, right? It's now at the tail end of this time of peace would certainly be the time to talk about that.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's see what we can do with that. And again, we have lots of opportunity to bring in almost every other suggestion in some ways without making that the central core focus, but instead continually coming back to what is the response to change. Another way of, like, I often like to think of these themes in terms of like questions, right? Questions to which there will be different people will have different answers, like different characters will have different answers, and different plot lines will suggest different answers to these questions. And for change, sort of my question would be like, what is the right relationship to have with change, right? That's going to be one of the, as you said, Trish, very, very truly, to try to catch things in amber, right? Is that the...
You're right.
Is that the goal? Is that a good way to respond to change? It's a way to respond to change, right? To just try to stop it, try to avoid it, try to prevent it. Do you run to it? Do you run with it? What are the consequences of doing either one of those things, right? Yeah. And preparedness for change, Rhiannon, I agree. Yeah.
And as I think about, for example, third and fourth age Lorien, third age Lorien, and Rivendell, it's like by the time we get to that point in time, the elves have realized that they can't stop it everywhere.
Right.
So what they've compromised for is, okay, we're going to find these few little places we still can keep as as we want it, kind of thing.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting thing to deal with down the road, substantially down the road,
Substantially down
and
the road.
which we could even begin planting the seeds for now in season
That's
5.
what I'm thinking.
Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
What about Celebrimbor? Right? The
Oh,
Elvish
sure.
Rings of Power. The whole point of the Elvish Rings of Power is like, you know, I can just imagine, you know, like a sales pitch from Celebrimbor, right? To like other elf lords, be like, so, if you're anything like me, you're an elf lord who desires to bring a halt to change and to create an enclave in which you can recreate the glories of the old world and not have the encroachment of time impinging on your nice little paradise. Am I right or am I right? Right? Okay. If so, do I have the product for you? Right? You know, yeah, like that's obviously I'm slightly exaggerating, but you know, kind of teasing him here, but
I don't remember if this was the case or not. Are we going to have this be like his reason for doing that? His reason for making those rings? I
think we could kind of plant it, right? I mean, we've introduced Celebrimbor. He was a character in last season.
Sure, absolutely.
So, and now you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Stephen, that Sauron is obviously involved in that, and the direction that the Rings of Power go, the Elvish Rings of Power, which Sauron didn't touch, are influenced by Sauron, who does not have their best interests at heart, right? So, yes, part of that is kind of influenced by the Sauron's corruption, but not all.
That also could be how Sauron hooks Celebrimbor in the first place. Is, hey, this is a way you can, you know, conserve and maintain and keep things under, you know, how you want it to be, kind of thing.
Yeah. Quite possibly. Yes, Stephen Cover says that Sauron could be offering an answer to the question the elves are already asking. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
This is not an issue that's going to go away. Again, I'm not saying, I don't know how much we want to go into the Sauron thing now. I mean, the forging of the Rings of Power is some time off in the future from here. But yeah, you know, when we think about kind of, just as when we were applying the theme of reconciliation and forgiveness, we were looking at our different characters and seeing, like, you know, who are going to be positive examples, who are going to be bad examples, people who refuse to forgive or have a heart, you know, so we've got, like, you know, Thingol versus Celeborn right there in Doriath that we were working on as like two examples of people who were, you know, not responding in the same way to the opportunity to be reconciled and to forgive others. But at the same, you know, we need to be thinking in similar kinds of ways to, like, who's going to react one way, who's going to react another way. Like I said, Turgon seems to me a good example for the one side. Mithros seems to me a good candidate for the other. Not necessarily an absolute extreme, I don't know, but he seems to me potentially we could take him that way. Someone, Nick, I think, was suggesting Finrod as kind of leaning in the Turgon-ish direction, and that even we could take his, like, of all of the elf-human relationships, his relationship with Beor could be most closely parallel to the Valar welcoming the elves into Valinor, right? Whereas when, you know, the House of Hador, it goes up into the north in Hithlum, they're more like allies, right? You know, joining together in a joint project, right? Remember, peer of elven kings, right, is the direction that Hador is going in. And Rhiannon and I love that suggestion that Finrod, we can show some change in Finrod's character, that he has his, like, natural impulse, right, is towards that kind of preservationist, that kind of resistance to change, that sort of thinking about things that way, and have his relationship with Andreth and Andreth's influence on him be shifting him to understand more and better the human point of view. Marie says Finrod is the most disappointed by human mortality. Yeah, the death of Beor is a great example of, like, the mini Valinor plan not working, right? You can try to set up a mini blessed realm, and you can try to bring in the humans to share in your mini blessed realm, like the Valar in turn brought your parents or grandparents in to Valinor to share in their blessed realm. But it's not going to pan out long term, right? Because they're going to wither and die, right? Apart from the fact that your kingdom is eventually going to be, conquered and taken over by a dragon. Before that, all of your allies are going to come in and die on you, right? So again, it's if he thinks that he can do that, it's an illusion, right? So I can see an arc with him where he starts off in much more in the sort of neo-Valinorian camp, and then through his own experience with Beor's death impacts him significantly, and then his relationship with Andreth. I like that. Yeah, spoiler alert, says Stephen Cover. Yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to bring up the dragon issue. Forget I said that. Yeah. And Marie is absolutely right. Finrod is more philosophically inclined than the other Noldor. Fingon isn't thinking through things in the way that Finrod does, right? And maybe that's one of the reasons, Marie, why Fingon is quicker to accept the humans as just peers, as just allies, right? Here we are on the front lines up here in the north, and they want to come and be on the front lines with us. Great. We will accept that. Where will Fingolfin be on this scale? Rhiannon, that is such a hard question. I'll come back to Fingolfin. Again, I find him hard. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but I find him hard in this season. Anyway, okay. Yeah, I think this will work. I think we've got a lot of opportunities here to both set up future stories this discussion on this theme has already borne fruit in one sense, in that, as I'm pretty sure I said 2 weeks ago, it was not really clear in my mind. Remember, I was saying that we've got the three kingdoms, right, of men. I mean, the three kindreds of men. And we had a clear distinction between the people of Haleth and the others, right? You had like two of the three groups move in with the elves, and one of the groups says, no, we're good. We're staying independent, right? And so the divergence of their choices was clear. What I was saying last time is that it wasn't yet clear to me how we were going to differentiate the people of Beor from, the people of Hador. And this already, I think we've already made some progress in doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Not by thinking about necessarily, not by coming at it from the question of how might the nature of the decision being made by the humans differ, but thinking about the relation, the difference in the relation with the men. So what if that fundamental difference is that the people of Hador, the people who are moving up into the north, into Hithlum, what they see themselves as doing is, rolling up their sleeves and setting to work alongside the elves in the maintenance of this siege, whereas the people of Beor see themselves retiring from the cares of the world, right? They're being accepted into a land of bliss. They found what they were seeking, right? They heard that there was a light in the west, and they found it, right? This is it. I mean, look, like they found these gorgeous, especially Finrod. Remember, Finrod's all about the bling, right? So this is spectacular, what they have found. And I can imagine the people of Beor saying to each other, we've found the good life, right? This is certainly everything we had hoped for and more. They're going to be disillusioned, as Finrod is also disillusioned, right? That's not... And then, of course, it would be kind of fun if he is the one who sort of leads them to be thinking, this isn't actually going to work out, right? What if Finrod is the one, after he has his change of perspective, he is the one who has to come to the people of Beor and say, I was wrong. I was wrong. I thought I could offer you guys sanctuary, that, we could live the blessed life together, retreating from the world, and we can't. That can't happen. I don't know. It's one idea. We can maybe refine Finrod's character arc there some and kind of work that out. Anyway, yeah. Steven says that he sees Fingolfin as more pro-change because he's the one who advocates the assault on Angband. Yeah. We'll come back to Fingolfin. I'm not going to be drawn. I want to. We'll get there, but I have issues. Yeah, Karita asks, how much does it matter to the story to have a clear takeaway about if there's a right, or if there isn't, or is or isn't a right way to handle a changing world? Yeah, no, I don't think that we are necessarily pushing an answer to that question. The point of the question isn't that it has a right answer that we reveal at the end, right? But rather, this is a question that lots of people are answering in different ways.
Yeah, you're establishing it as the question. Because I would think this, like we said, this is a, themes are building on each other. So this is going to be another piece of the cumulative, environment that I think is going to go multi-season.
Right. Yeah. And we do want to illuminate an elven viewpoint, Marie. I agree. And that's why if we were to do what I just described with Finrod, and again, we may decide that we want to shift that or alter that in some way, but if we want Finrod to have that kind of trajectory, for him to be the one who really sort of changes most in his attitude towards change, right? The meta change of Finrod being one of the major, plot threads, in a sense, thematic threads of the season. If we do that, then Marie, in my mind, then he would be the one who would be kind of our instrument to convey, both by direct voicing at the beginning and contrasting him with other people as he changes as we go along. I definitely think that happens. And then, yes, Stephen, exactly. Those elves who are still not okay with change and think that they can avoid it get a river of fire in the face at the end of the season. So change is a coming one way or the other. For good or ill, it is the end of the Leaguer of Angband that you have known. Yes, exactly. Tony's wondering if there's a place for Galadriel to verbalize this question, as she'll be a ring bearer later on.
It's so funny that you mentioned Galadriel, because I'm just sitting here thinking, of all these people that are in the story right now, only Galadriel, Celeborn, and Círdan are going to still be with us.
Yeah. And we had Galadriel as a major focus of change. She was one of the major characters who was undergoing a transformation over the course of last. I mean, if we think about where the character was in episode 1 versus where the character is in episode 13, Galadriel is one of the biggest changers.
She's kind of at the far end of the spectrum, isn't she? She's kind of the poster child for change in elves.
Yeah.
She seems to adapt and embrace it better than many.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, of course, it's Galadriel, right? So, making Galadriel be near the center of the action at almost any time seems like not a bad call, right? I don't think we can overplay Galadriel exactly. Maybe we can, but it would be a little hard, I think, to overplay Galadriel. Though at the same time, I think that if she's not at the center of the action and is more sort of withdrawn from the primary plot arcs of this semester, that would all, or this semester, listen to me, of the season, that would also be,
crossing
tell
the
what I've been
streams
thinking about. Yeah, exactly. Oh, whew. Okay.
Well, I mean, we don't want her to drop out entirely, but
no,
she wouldn't be
certainly not. Yeah. Certainly not. Yeah, I know. Marie says, she's with the Green Elves. She's having her honeymoon with the Green Elves in Doriath, which is, of course, where everything happens, with the humans. So, yeah, exactly. One of those characters who decides to finally go on a restful vacation to, the
center of
right. it's just like Die Hard or something like that. But anyway, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, Stephen, Cover, it would be interesting to have her get exponentially more and more important as the season continues. We have to pace ourselves, right? Because
she probably needs to get more and more important as seasons go.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
By season.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have to pace ourselves with that, but no, I mean, she'll be there, Marie, as you point out. She's going to be, if we're going to have her in Osirian, she's going to be on the scene, right, for some interesting part of the actions there. Lincoln says, Galadriel is a John McClane figure. I had no idea I wanted to see that, but now I do. Yeah, no, that's kind of just throwing that out there as a little parallel. Yeah. But no, I don't see us using Galadriel as the central character. So far in my mind, Finrod is the one who is suggesting himself as the primary vehicle of this, sort of, or not vehicle, but I don't know, locus. I'm sure exactly how to describe it, but because he's both the mover of it, but also like the one in which the changes. And so that was the same thing with Galadriel, right? She had to forgive herself. She had to be reconciled in a sense to herself, and her process was part of like the healing that the Noldor themselves need. But she was also at the epicenter of the whole Sindar and Noldor thing. So whether it was her own change, and her, her own issues with reconciliation and forgiveness, or whether she was, like a bystander and target of the question of she was at the core of a lot of those things that were happening. I'll
tell you one place to put Galadriel, where she could be sort of the, not narrator, but kind of the viewpoint of this would be in the frame. I don't know if anybody's on the forums talked about the frame yet. But
yeah, we've had some talks, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't want to go to the frame yet, but no, you're right. There's opportunity there to connect.
Yeah, I don't want to leave that out in terms of rather than try to mush her into the main body of the season. That could be a place for her to be. Yeah.
Rhiannon, totally agree. One of the perks of choosing Finrod as that kind of focus character in season 5 is that his oath in the Dagor Bragollach, his oath to Barahir, could, I think, easily be made to represent in his mind a kind of culmination of this arc. Absolutely. I think that would be awesome. And really emphasize the significance, set up the importance of that oath and everything. I think that's really kind of cool. Murray, very sensible for us to settle on the theme before settling on the frame.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I didn't figure it was verboten to say the word frame, right? You guys are going to yell at me. Oh my God, you can't say that right now. We're not there yet.
It's not. No, that's just me resisting my own temptations. That's just me. It's like self-talk is like what that is, Yeah.
She said frame. Oh no.
That's just me avoiding the shiny object. That's what that is.
All right. It's become a new F word. Frame.
Yeah. But no, I agree. I mean, you're right. We do have the opportunity, and someone earlier.
I just wanted to bring it up as something that we could just, like. Okay, I know we have to talk about it later, but it's like I said, instead of trying to like shoehorn her in here, she's still going to have a very prominent presence, but not be in the main story.
Sure, yeah. No, that would be interesting. And certainly the question of change and relationship to change in a Lothlorien Third Age context is an interesting question, right? It's a very natural question. But anyway, yeah, okay. So but I agree, Nick. It's not shoehorning if she's on the spot already, right? So it's true enough. Yeah, we did already decide that Galadriel and Celeborn were gonna take their honeymoon in Osirian, thinking that was away from the action, right?
Well, the shoehorning I'm thinking of is how big a piece. We're shoehorning a big part for her.
Exactly,
small
absolutely.
part for her. So
yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, all right, cool. I'm cool with this. Let's move forward now, because it's almost time to stop avoiding. No, in fact, it's entirely time to stop avoiding the question. Fingolfin. All right. Speaking of F words, no, Fingolfin. All right, let me just be upfront right away with my problem. And again, maybe you guys will all convince me that I don't actually have as big a problem as I think. But I don't know how to handle Fingolfin at the end. I don't know how to handle his challenge against Morgoth. I don't know how to handle it. Because I really want to depict... Okay, so ultimately my problem is I feel my heart at war with my head. That's the problem I'm having. My heart has always been moved by the heroism of his fight with Morgoth. I have always loved that, some of the images that are used in the description of his defiance and fight with Morgoth have been some of the things that have been most inspiring to me from the Silmarillion. I love that. But my head tells me it's an act of despair. Like, what motivates him to go and do this? It is a choice that he it is a choice motivated by despair that he makes in ignorance. There's a tragedy involved there that he believes they're gone. He believes it's the results of the battle are not as bad as he thinks they are. He thinks all is lost, and he charges off. And yes, again, I redouble what I said about all of the ways in which I love his duel with Morgoth. But at the same time, it's also a form of suicide. He is choosing death. He's in despair. And I don't know how to be true to what we can't just make him look like an idiot, right? We can't make him look foolish. We can't make him look dumb. We can't make, I don't know. I'm not really sure how to handle it in a way that kind of is true to the situation that is described. I mean, it's not, although the act is very heroic, it's like, I don't know, tactically it's heroic, but strategically it's disastrous. I mean, at the end of the day, he throws his life away and accomplishes nothing. Okay, Morgoth walks with a limp for the rest of his life, so I guess that's something, but...
he slowed him down.
Sorry, what was that, Dave?
I said he slowed him down.
He slowed him down, exactly, yeah. I just...
He never left his fortress ever again.
Yeah. Well, no, he didn't, but he had already done that. I mean, like, he's already making an exception to that policy to come out and fight with Fingolfin in the first place.
Also, I agree with your point. It's like, I don't want to change this. Like, I wouldn't want the on-screen portrayal to be one that's like, where the takeaway seems to be like, well, he died, but he got that, he injured Morgoth fatally, and like Morgoth was, I don't want it to look like he accomplished something.
Right. Hey, Nick has an interesting suggestion in that direction.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Nick's suggestion is, what if there's a change that heads sort of outside the text? Nick says, what if this destroys Sauron's confidence in Morgoth? We had talked about kind of wanting to open a wedge between Sauron and Morgoth, where Sauron is going to begin to kind of go off on his own and set up on his own. What if that's the moment when Sauron, it does change? So it isn't pointless. Like, what Fingolfin does accomplish something, because what it does accomplish is it shows that Morgoth is vulnerable, right? He is not unassailable.
That is true, and it's even like in the book, even it seems significant that Morgoth is fearful, reluctant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a bad look. I mean, this is at the very least, it's like an internal PR disaster for Morgoth, right? I mean, he answers the challenge because he looks like a git if he doesn't, and then he wins, but he loses, right? I mean, it's clear who comes out better in that fight, and it's the guy who dies, right? So it is possible, I think. Exactly, Nick. He only goes out because his lieutenants are watching him, and then as they continue to watch, it's kind of ugly. It's kind of ugly. Good, yeah, as Marie said, originally, the thing that Sauron admired about Morgoth was his strength. Right? This is the guy who is getting stuff done. This is the guy who's not afraid to make the hard calls. This is the guy who will put things into action. This is the guy who has the power to make the change that we want to make in the world, right? That was the whole rallying cry for Sauron behind Morgoth way back in season 1. And now, yeah, can Sauron still see the same thing when he sees Morgoth? That I think is interesting. So, the problem that I'm having is not necessarily with how do we depict the fight. Once he is riding out on horseback, I'm fine with it, right? What the specific site where I'm struggling is culminates in his decision to ride out and like what he says to people as he's riding out, but begins with how that interacts with his whole purpose. We have depicted Fingolfin as primarily he's being the one who is the primary advocate of the Leaguer, right? Let's hold him in Leaguer. We can do this, everybody. I, as High King of the Noldor, that means I am like overall military commander, and I say, let us... Oops, sorry. Accidentally advancing slides arbitrarily here. Yes, it's his motivation for going, Marie. That's the thing that troubles me, and that's the thing. I feel like we have to have an answer to that. Like, we have to show why he goes and how... So, basically... so let me explain a few bad scenarios that I can see unfolding, right? Fingolfin is the pillar of strength. He is the one who is saying, we can do this, everybody. We have beaten Morgoth, and we can continue to beat him. Through our strength, we can hold back the forces of darkness and protect Beleriand and the rest of Middle-earth behind it. This is we accept this post. We are the watchmen on the walls. This is what we do, right? So that's Fingolfin at the beginning, right? And then he rides off to challenge him to single combat because he thinks they've lost. So what do we show Fingolfin staring out over the flaming, fields, believing that, his children are killed, that his people that his shining plan of we can do it, he's been proven wrong, and being confronted with the fact that he was wrong and that they've lost. His response to that is what? To die? To go out in a blaze of glory? Because is it just like, so I see that we're all doomed to die, and so I might as well go out this way? I don't like that story for Fingolfin. That seems like a crappy story for Fingolfin. I don't want that to be the story for Fingolfin, but I'm trying to think of another one that makes sense and gets him up there. Tony says, and Rhiannon, I think you were suggesting the same thing. Tony says, I have to think he believes he can win, and that his winning is their only hope. So that it's more of a, right, as Nick says, he's shooting the moon, right? If Fingolfin's strapping on his armor and saying, I'm going to go riding out against Angband, and everybody else being like, okay, I guess we're attacking Angband, and he's going to be like, no, just me. You all stay here. I'm going by myself to beat on the doors of Angband and challenge Morgoth. I mean, again, like, what's the rationale? What does he say? If the thing that he says is, you have to stand here, but I can beat him. I think I can beat him. If I throw down Morgoth, we still win. Right? If it's a risking, Nick, as you say, if it's a risking of his life on a hazard of even a very, very small chance of victory. But why would he believe this? The risk to me with that version is that he just looks delusional. And I know that the fight might seem to kind of justify, in one sense, his conviction, but in another sense, it's not going to justify his conviction. He is a very serious underdog in this fight, and he doesn't come that close to winning, right? I mean, he accomplishes stuff. We could change it so that, like, Morgoth is totally on the ropes, right? And it looks like Fingolfin is just a hair's breadth away from pulling it out and winning, right? But
by the way, I think we should do some version of that.
We could.
Not has Morgoth on the ropes, but I think there should be one moment during the fight where you're like, maybe.
Right. When you can think it's just possible.
Where it looks like he's about to win, but where it seems like maybe he might actually stand a chance.
Right. You can just imagine that it's possible. Yeah. Now, several people have said, Oakwig was saying, Marie was just saying, he's Fey. Yes, but I would say, to me, that doesn't solve the problem. To me, that labels the problem, right? I have a problem with Fey. That is, Fey is hard to convey. Fey is hard to understand. Notice that we've already had one Fey character doing Fey things, right? And that was Feanor charging off to his death. And we injected delusion into Feanor's death scene, right? When he is Fey and charging off, we played on the fact that this was his pride deceiving him, right? His Fey mood. And part of this, I think, is also part of my problem with the whole Fey thing is, I will confess, I don't feel that I've ever really understood it. Maybe I've just not read enough Norse poetry. That's possible. Maybe that would help me understand it better than I do. I mean, I should probably read more Norse poetry anyway. But anyway, like maybe that's my problem. That I just don't, viscerally, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know. Anyway, yes, see, Chris Stevens, it is easy for me to read Fey as despair and therefore suicide. But it's not that. Like, that's too simplistic. The state of being Fey, as Tolkien depicts it, is not that, or at least it's more than that. It's just as much, it's a disregard for death, but it's also running willingly to death. It's seeking death, and it's disregarding death, and it's, again, I don't feel like, in my visceral heart of hearts, I get it. I feel it. So I'm, and again, and this, I'm not proud of that. So when the day comes, when I finally read enough and experienced enough and felt enough to get it, maybe there will come a day when I will read these passages in Tolkien and it will click for me, and I will feel it. But I haven't yet. And so it's one of the things that makes me struggle with this. Yeah. Brianna is suggesting that if I watched more anime, I might also get it better. Possibly. I can believe that. I can believe that. Yeah.
I guess the question is, I guess the question is what do we want the viewers to feel when they watch this or witness this?
Yes.
And I kind of, in my opinion, I think it kind of should be, overwhelmingly, it should be sad.
Mm-hmm. It's tragedy.
Right?
It's tragedy.
Yeah.
Primarily.
So I guess the question is, how do we deliver that appropriately? Because I agree, like, yeah, it is tricky, and I think this idea about having an impact on Sauron I like that idea, because I don't think that's out of thin air. I think that accurately reflects what the impact of this event was on Middle Earth as portrayed in the books. That it does kind of reveal to some extent that Morgoth is vulnerable, not in a militarily strategic sense of a direct assault on him might succeed, but it shows that he's prone to fear and pride and things like that. Yeah. So I like that idea, but I still don't want this to be I don't want to portray a scene where he sacrifices himself to accomplish a military goal, and that's what people take away from it. I want it to be as he hops on his horse and rides off, I want the viewer to just know, well, this is not going to go well. Right.
For
this is the end of
people
Fingolfin.
To say, no, don't go, don't do it, Fingolfin. Yeah. No, that seems to me right.
How do we do that in a way that he doesn't look like an idiot?
Exactly. And or to think about that same question from the other angle, right? Imagine for a second that no one in our audience has read Tolkien at all, right? And so they're just watching our show as a story that they're seeing for the first time. And we get to this scene and people are outraged, how could they do that to Fingolfin? Why did they he just threw his life away. It didn't even make any sense, right? Why? I liked Fingolfin and he was really strong and they just threw his life away and accomplished nothing. Why would he do that? Why would they do that to Fingolfin's character? I can see people saying that, right? And I'm not saying that, and again, I can easily imagine the story unfolding in such a way that those concerns would be justified, right? They would look like that.
Why don't we ask that about the book? Do you think we've just drunk the Kool-Aid? We've just read enough Tolkien that we just know not to look at it that way.
Right. We just accept.
Yeah. It's kind of a suspension of disbelief. It's it's kind of a dumb thing to do, but characters in Tolkien do this all the time, and it's heroic. It's heroic.
Right. Right.
Is this moment qualitatively different from Eomer riding around the Gladden Fields after he thinks
death take us all right now to ruin in the world's ending? I think if
how do these two moments compare?
I think if there is one moment of feyness that I get, it's that one.
Mm-hmm.
I can't feel along with Feanor. I can't feel along with Fingolfin. I can't even feel along with Frodo in the departure from Shelob's lair. A little bit more, but I still don't totally get what comes over Frodo in that. And he's described as, Sam anyway, describes him as being in a fey mood there. Éomer, yes. Death take us all right now to ruin in the world's ending. That's the line where I start crying when I'm reading this scene, and then I totally lose it when Aragorn leaps off the ships at the Harlond. And I think what feels different for me, the reason I feel like I get that better is that Éomer is boxed in a corner, right? Éomer is put in this situation, and he didn't choose it. He chose to come to battle and stuff. That's not what I mean. But, Theoden is dead. Éowyn, out of nowhere, Éowyn is dead. He thought Éowyn was safe at home, and now all of a sudden there she is dead on the battlefield, right? It's like the whole world has suddenly convulsed around him, and everyone he loves is now suddenly dead. right? And they're hopelessly outnumbered and surrounded on the battlefield. They're all going to die anyway. Half the people are already dead. So all he has left, right, is ride now to ruin and the world's ending, right? And it doesn't feel like suicide to me because he's going to die. Like, it's just a question of dying well at that point, right? And Éomer's resolve to die well as he can on that field has always felt to me like the most like positive thing he could possibly do. Like, to me, Éomer's reaction, though it is clearly Fey and he is clearly in a sense seeking death, that doesn't feel to me like suicide, because he is making the most like proactive choice that he can make. Fingolfin doesn't have to do it, right? Circumstances, and he's not in the same place, right? He rides out. Exactly, Nick. He starts in a place of safety, right? Éomer, there's nothing else that Éomer can do. He can die well or he can die badly. Fingolfin has the option of saying, let's pause, regroup, and fight again another day. And the thing also that like bothers me a little bit about his decision to ride off is I'm like, leadership is something I think about a lot and I care about a lot. And I'm like, he's the king, right? His job is to, there's a sense in which he's also, again, one way in which one could read it or one way in which one could turn it is that he's abdicating. He's abdicating his responsibility, right? Like, he doesn't have the luxury of throwing away his life like that, right? He's the leader, for crying out loud, right? And so there is an element of abandoning his post, it feels like, that bothers me as well. I remember I said my heart and my head. My heart loves the fight between him and Morgoth, but my head has these problems with why he does it. And Éomer is the leader too, Marie, but again, the people he's leading are all in the same position he is, right? Again, like, Éomer's response is good leadership, because under those circumstances, there and then, on that day, in that place, right, he... If he does not choose to die well, then everybody else is going to die badly too, right? He's not thinking about hope for his people, but it is also true that the only possible hope for his people is to fight on, right? As bravely and aggressively as they can. If they try to like back off and protect themselves, they're all just going to get slaughtered, right? So again, I think that Éomer's decision is good leadership as well. Optimal leadership in that moment. I cannot think of a thing that Éomer could possibly have done that would have been better than what he did. Fingolfin? I mean, sure, he does leave an heir, Oakwig. I mean, in that sense, it's not an utter... I mean, he's not leaving everyone into a void of chaos, right, when he leaves. And of course, one can criticize Éomer for not having made an heir already, for crying out loud. Mr. Bachelor into his irresponsible ages. But anyway,
I got a counterpoint for you,
okay,
Corey.
Okay.
Here's the and this is to some extent, this is me playing devil's advocate because I kind of agree with you.
Okay.
So I think one thing we can probably agree on is that in kind of a weird sort of indirect way, Fingolfin is right.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that like that their entire endeavor to like besiege Morgoth is about as pointless as his ride to challenge him one-on-one.
Right. That like he is perceiving the ultimate like, futility of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a sense in which like, what he's doing is kind of extreme, but it's also like, I mean, why not? Because it's, and I kind of wonder if maybe that is an angle that we can play up, just sort of like that I guess it is despair, but not despair in sort of not despair in like the kind of the way that Gandalf criticizes in the Council of Elrond, where it's like, no, like that kind of despair is pointless, but rather it's sort of like, it's like the realization that like this is a fruitless endeavor. The Noldor they shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be doing this. That they cannot win this way, and that the only victory will be the victory that comes from across the sea. But I wonder if one way we could make that explicit, for the viewers, is if what if we give him some form of foresight?
Interesting.
That he sees, like, not just he looks on in their defeat and the ruin of the, kind of the leaguer, and realizes, like, oh crap, this is never going to work. But, like, what if we actually give him explicit foresight, where he kind of gets a glimpse into how things are going to go, and realizes it's not going to be through military alliances and plans and battles, but it's going to be through this, like, sequence of events. And I guess the question then becomes, so why does he go and kill himself in response to that? And maybe we can kind of think on that a little more about, like, how does that glimpse or that foresight turn into this decision?
Right.
But maybe there's some way that he realizes, like, by doing this, that this is the role that he can play as well, like inspire his people, or I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. No, this foresight thing is really interesting, and it comes back to several people, Nick and Rhiannon, I think, and Tony have been kind of talking about this, like, back to the question of maybe he goes because he believes there's a chance, right? A tiny chance, but he's going not out of despair, not as a form of suicide, but as a desperate act of self-sacrifice, knowing that there's a 99% chance that he is going to die and that it's not going to work. But by golly, there's a 1% chance that if he prevails, he turns the tide, and if he doesn't prevail and turn the tide ain't getting turned, right?
Right, yeah. Maybe it's a realization. It's a realization that, like, this is in fact the most useful thing that he could do. Like, there's no point. He's not abandoning his people because, like, his people. He's not doing them any good as king anyway. Right.
Yeah, Marie was uncomfortably quoting, "You may triumph on the field of battle for a day, but against the power in the north, that now rises." This, yeah. I mean, if we have him quoting Denethor, I'm uncomfortable again. Basically, is what I'm saying. We don't want him there. Okay, but back to your foresight question. So Dave, without the foresight thing, my my problem with it probably won't work, but this is our only shot, is why the heck would he think there's a shot? I mean, like, seriously, he thinks he can, like, if I kill the evil god with my little sword, then everything will be fine. But, like, what earthly reason does he have for believing that he can pull that off? Basically, I think that if we went in that direction, the enormous risk that we would have to counteract is that he looks merely delusional. Like, he's not despairing. He's just left our world, right, and is now living in a different place, right? That's my concern there. But Dave, your foresight suggestion would be a way to counteract that, right? If there is some reason, right? And because it doesn't have to be a rational reason, right? He doesn't have to be sitting there and saying, like, I know of a secret weakness that Morgoth has, that if I hit him right there, I can kill him. And so that, it doesn't have to be like that, right? Nothing rational about this plan. But instead, like, the fulfillment of destiny, right?
Yeah. That's true. Maybe he, like so many other famous characters in fiction, he gets a glimpse of things to come, and he doesn't really understand what they mean.
Yeah, exactly.
He just knows, like, Morgoth's ultimate defeat is going to come through some kind of courageous act of some person from his family, and it's like, well, let's give it a shot.
Thank you for that transition, because that brings me to another interesting point, and perhaps this could be brought in to be relevant here. We're talking about foresight and stuff. So, and this actually is potentially a kind of transition to the Aredhel discussion as well. If I had to list my short list of stories or story elements that Tolkien wrote in the context of his Silmarillion writings over the course of his life that does not make the final cut into the published Silmarillion, when Christopher put that together. One of my top favorites is the prophecy of Ulmo for Turgon, right? For those of you who are unfamiliar to this, let me recap this briefly. When in the early days, like if you read the Fall of Gondolin's story from the Book of Lost Tales, the one which was published, of course, in the very recent Fall of Gondolin publication, the message that Ulmo delivers to Tuor to bring to Gondolin is not, as in the published Silmarillion, time to pack your bags and leave, guys. Right? That is not the message. It's time to pack up and leave. The message is, it's go time, Turgon. If you leave Gondolin and you march out against Morgoth, you will beat him. He will lose. He will be overcome and destroyed on the battlefield by you. The elves will win, and the Valar will come to your aid. And Ulmo is like, I'll deliver the Valar if you march out and attack him. And you, Turgon, will bring about the downfall of your choice. You're going out into what seems hopeless, right? Marching out of your safe little place and against the apparently undefeatable power of the North. If you do that, you'll win. And the whole tide will turn. And that is the message that Turgon says, no thanks, I'll stay here in my cozy city instead. That's the message that he refuses. This is why the first time I read that story in the Book of Lost Tales, I had this, like, one of those moments where I'm like, oh, that finally several sentences from the Silmarillion, several mentions in the Silmarillion that had never made a lick of sense to me finally clicked, right? Remember that line, while the Noldor are still in Valinor and right after Melkor has been released, right, and he's starting to spread dissension among the Noldor, there's that one sentence where the narrator tells us whenever Turgon passed by, right, Morgoth used to, like, get the chills, right? There's something about Turgon that totally creeped out. Like, he had some foreboding of ill to himself whenever Turgon came around, right? And I never got that because I felt like that reference was never paid off in the narrative. I'm like, okay, so why in the end, why does, like, according to the narrative of the published Silmarillion, I'm like, why did Turgon give Melkor the heebie-jeebies? Right? I don't get it. Because he was the last one standing, right? Okay, maybe, right? Similarly, I always felt that the prophecy of Huor in the Fens of Serach, from you and from me, a new star shall arise. Like, okay, well, like, yes, a new star does in fact arise. But the prophecy itself, like, from us shall come the one who shall deliver us, right? And Eärendil, like, kind of does, and this comes down to, like, my Eärendil problem, right? Because ultimately Eärendil, I don't feel like Eärendil pays off. Like, I don't feel like Eärendil's cool. I like Eärendil, but
oh my God, I just heard gasps, like, throughout the whole entire world.
He doesn't pay off. He doesn't pay off. And honestly, like, I'm telling you,
he's got a cool star on his brow.
He's cool, but, like, you know, come on. Bring Tolkien back from the dead, and he'd be the first to admit that Eärendil doesn't pay off. Why? And this is Tony. Aren't you the one who was talking about this? Weren't we talking about this in? When were we talking about this? Exploring the Lord of the Rings, I think. I can't remember which. Talking about basically how Eärendil is still your number one, like, untold story that you wish Tolkien had finished, right? Tolkien never got around to telling Eärendil's story. right? The story of Aredhel is just never written. What we have is fragmentary, right? He was, and in the early conception, he is the hero, capital H hero, right? I mean, the language about like the prophesied birth of Aredhel, it is actively messianic. Like, he is the child foretold who shall come and deliver the people. I mean, it's explicitly messianic language about Aredhel. And then, like, what does he do? Yeah, he conveys the message. I'm not trying to like say that, again, like what he said isn't cool. And Tolkien does some awesome things with it, especially Gil Estel, the Star of High Hope, Rhiannon. I like that. But he never wrote a narrative of Aredhel like any of the narratives of Aredhel he envisioned, and he envisioned many of them. There's a set of notes that I remember we talked about when we were doing Volume 2 of the History of Middle-earth and the Mythgard Academy, during the like latter chapters, which are dedicated to the fragmentary stuff about Aredhel that never got written. And there's this one really illuminating note that Tolkien wrote, and it's an outline, like a table of contents, basically. And if I'm remembering this correctly, it's something like this. The entire Book of Lost Tales that he wrote, everything that he wrote, which is volume 1 and 2 of the History of Middle-earth, right? That was going to be volume 1 of the 7-volume series. The rest of the 6 volumes of which were going to be Aredhel, right? And the adventures of Aredhel and all of the things that he accomplished and everything else, right? That is payoff, my friend. That is what the Aredhel story was supposed to be. And we never get it. He never told it, right? He kills Encalagon, but I'm sorry. Encalagon is a makeup date. You know, like, he's not supposed to kill Encalagon. Who's he supposed to kill? Come on, Mythgard Academy students. Who is he supposed to kill? Ungoliant. Yes. He was supposed to kill he was supposed to slay darkness itself. I mean, holy cow. Read the description of what he accomplishes in one of the only narratives which doesn't even name him, which is the second version of, like, the intermediary version of the errantry poem between the old funny fairy little errantry poem and the Aredhel was a mariner poem that Bilbo sings, the sort of intermediary version. Stephen, you say she's not darkness itself, she's not Satan. No, not now, not in the published version. In the Book of Lost Tales, Gloomweaver, oh man, she was the embodiment of darkness. She ate the moon, for crying out loud. She caught the moon in her webs, right? I mean, holy cow. Anyway, and when she was huge, right? When Ungoliant was one of like the primary forces of evil and darkness in the universe, threatening even to Morgoth and not just temporarily, then that's when Aredhel was going to slay her in combat, right? I mean, oh my goodness, it's amazing. Whatever. All right, I'm done complaining about the Aredhel story we don't have. What we do with Aredhel is going to be really interesting, and I think there's lots of scope. But anyway, back to my original point, which will bring us eventually back to Fingolfin. I love the prophecy. I love Ulmo's original message to Turgon. I love that whole concept. It's not going to happen, right? Turgon's going to say no. Turgon does say no. So we don't have to say, well, gosh, if that occurred, the whole thing would be different, right? Well, we don't have to worry about that because he doesn't do it, right? But the point is that the prophecy is there, right? What if Fingolfin, Turgon's dad, what if that's the foresight that he has? What if he has some glimmer, even some message? What if Ulmo gives him some kind of... that message has not been delivered to Turgon. Turgon doesn't know it, right? Rhiannon, exactly. What if Fingolfin... if the desperate hope that Fingolfin is riding forth with is not that he personally can take down Morgoth, slay the god of evil in the north, and overcome Angband single-handedly, which makes him sound insane. What if instead the desperate hope, that 1 in 1,000 chance that he's riding out for, is that the Valar will come and follow him, that the Valar will come, that Manwë will come, that Tolkas will come if he goes, if he rides, that there is some hint, some glimmer, some foretaste of the prophecy that will be delivered to Turgon, and that's why he feels it's worth going. And why he believes that if he did that, that wouldn't be an abdication. That would be good leadership, right? To say, I'm going to do but I'm going to take this risk entirely on myself. Nobody else come with me, right? Because it won't matter. The difference between, 1,000 of us aren't more likely to break Angband than one of us, right? And if I go, calling out upon the Valar, and of course, Manwë comes, right? Thorondor comes. Right, so we can work with that, right? We can play with that. No, Rhiannon, yeah. Oh, man, I hadn't thought of that. Rhiannon is suggesting that if Olmo gives him the message directly, that it might seem like Olmo got Fingolfin killed, right? Oh, yeah, if you ride out, yeah, see what happens. No, seriously, I'm sure it'll be fine. Fingolfin. Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah. No. Clearly, we avoid that. But yeah, and Oakwig says, then how beautiful is it that that Turgon, Thorondor bears the body of Fingolfin to Gondolin, and Turgon builds his cairn, right? The opportunities for, if this is the prophecy that's delivered to Turgon by Tuor later on, I'm picturing the scenes of Turgon standing by the cairn of his father Fingolfin, and having heard the, oh man, just saying, I think there's some possibility here. This is a thread that, to me, could sort of save it. We'd have to be, I totally agree, Marie. We'd have to handle it very carefully. It can't be the full vision, right? Obviously it can't be the full vision because he doesn't know it's Turgon who can do it, right? But yeah, and I don't know how we do it exactly. Is it just not a dream message he receives from Olmo? Because I agree, Rhiannon, we don't want to make it sound like Olmo's entrapping him. But what if it's just a foreboding that he has? Yeah. So what's the point of Huor's prophecy in the Near Ninth, Stephen? Great question. Well, I don't know. We got to figure out what we want to do with Eärendil and how we want to handle the Eärendil story. Yeah. Yes. And I don't even know. Like I said, Ancalagon the Black is cool, but why is Ancalagon the Black? Tell me, what's the signal? What's the role of Ancalagon the Black in the story? He is dragged in as a dude to get killed by Eärendil. That's his only role. Does he do anything? Do we know the first thing about... He's apparently black. He's the greatest of the dragons, I think, in some sense. At least Gandalf alludes to him as if he were. And he's killed by Eärendil. He's a set piece. He's not... and he's winged, sure, yeah, but anyway, anyway, I'm just saying, we can, I'm saying fair warning, I'm going to be a little inclined to beef up Eärendil a bit, and beef up his stories. I'm not saying we follow the proportions of that one adorable outline that Tolkien makes, which of course he never comes anywhere close to fulfilling the narrative promise of that outline. But I kind of want to develop Eärendil a little bit. It's not that I want to take out those passages that, foretell the greatness. It's that I want to pay off those lines more, right? Anyway, we'll get there. I don't get too distracted with Ancalagon the Black. But again, how many sentences does Ancalagon the Black get? Come on, seriously. One reference in one sentence? My point is, there's work to be done there. That's all I'm saying.
Definitely.
There's work to be done there.
Definitely under-deliver.
Yeah. We need to deliver.
That's cool.
That.
We could make it a. Oh, am I up there? Where's my thing? Hold on. Oh, we could make it a spinoff.
You know, The Adventures of Aredhel almost was a spin-off. Tolkien almost spun that off. Absolutely. He was going to have the voyages of Aredhel be like all those voyages that he went on before he went to Valinor, you know, was like, that was what volumes like 2 through 6 were going to be, you know, in the Book of Lost Tales, was like the various and sundry adventures of Aredhel as he explores around the world. So yeah, lots and lots of spin-off potential for the voyages of Aredhel.
I think it should be a buddy comedy with Aredhel and Caligon the Black.
Yeah, you know.
In fact, let's just take every character from the Silmarillion that we feel like didn't get enough screen time
And put them in the spin-off.
Put them all on Arendel's ship together.
Half adventure story, half sitcom. Is that the, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
A dramedy.
I think a dramedy. Yeah. Can't fail. All right. Okay. So I think we can work with this. Let's get to Aredhel. So speaking of Gondolin and Turgon, let's talk about Aredhel. Do we want to talk more about? Let's jump straight to the heart of the matter, because the question of why she ends up differing from Turgon, like the premise of why she wants to leave, we've already, I think, said enough about that to go on with. We have to refine that more when we get to those episodes, but that she is having a difference in vision and feels like Turgon either is already or is threatening to fall short of the original vision for Gondolin, and that she decides she wants to go in a different direction. That I think we've already established pretty clearly. So how exactly we play that out and what the details of that are, we can work out later. Let's get to the meat of the question with Aredhel. Wahoo! Yikes! Almost like spinning the wheel there. Okay. What do we do with her relationship with Eol? How do we handle this? Aredhel and the Stockholm Syndrome? Or what do we do? So...
Tough.
What if... Here's my inclination. My inclination is... I would kind of like to take a crack at giving Aredhel and Eol's relationship some depth here.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree.
I'd like to make it a love story gone bad.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not a home imprisonment story or a bewitchment story or even a Stockholm Syndrome story.
Nope, you're right. This is the way to go.
Well,
That's what I think.
Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, but there are people out in the world who are very able to mold themselves into extremely charming people.
Yes.
To basically get what they want. Okay. And I can totally see Eol being this kind of person where it would be a love story. It's just that he, over time, then, the underside sort of comes out. But I think when we first meet him, he should not be, suspiciously, questionable. I mean, we should see him the way she sees him.
Right.
Charming and deferring to her and, caring for her, and I'm late at night and I can't think of all the words, but anyway,
yeah.
Seems like that's the kind of line you're going down to.
Yeah, indeed.
Exactly.
I would say even going beyond the relationship, I think we should make an effort to make him somewhat sympathetic initially. So that his story is more explicitly a story of fall.
Right, and that we as viewers also feel, would the word be betrayed, or we feel what she feels kind of as the story progresses.
Yes, it feels like loss. Margaret Joyce makes a wonderful point. Margaret says someone is finally interested in what she has to say. Absolutely. She should find in Eol a partner. Finally, right? Mm-hmm. She's been trying to get things done. She's been trying. She doesn't. She thought like basically she went to Gondolin, essentially agreeing to be her brother's partner. Like the two of them were going to work together. Right? They had this project. She bought into it. It was his idea, right? She bought into it, and they're like, okay. She didn't just
buy into it. She also got people to come to it, right? Remember?
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. She was a recruiter as well as herself buying into it, and then that is not panning out. Right. So she's trying to go in a different direction, and then I've got to think, we could make her into like a fainting Disney princess.
Oh God,
victim,
no, please.
Right? We could do that. We could make her like wandering into the like dark elf's domain and like seduced into his house and the door slams behind her and she's helpless to do anything. Like we could play that. But that's not to me a very interesting story, and especially since we also have some very fascinating parallels here, right? First, Marie, I wasn't even thinking of that one, but you're absolutely right. Marie says, last season, Galadriel met an older man who had been in Middle-earth forever. And she, of course, was a strong-willed woman with ideas of her own, right? And she ends up getting together with Celeborn. Aredhel is following the same. Are we going to have a similar kind of arc, right? Are we going to end with a happy wedding at the end? It's not going to be a wedding at the end, right? They're not going to wait that long. But yeah, is she a second Galadriel in that way? But of course, even more topically, or rather geographically speaking, this is Nan Elmoth, right? It's like Thingol and Melian again, right? Has she found her, like, okay, well, he's not exactly Melian, but that's kind of like, she's more like Thingol, and he's the parallel is between her and Thingol and him and Melian, right? That she has found this, like, she has wandered like Thingol did into Nan Elmoth, and she has discovered this strange and mysterious being who was already there, right? And she falls in love with him and remains there in Nan Elmoth, shut away from the world for an indefinite time. Very close parallel to the Thingol and Melian story, right? But it's not the Thingol and Melian story, but it's parallel to it. There is also, of course, and Marie, exactly as I know I've already mentioned, and of course I give props, or perhaps I blame Kate Neville for this and the wonderful talk I heard her give at a conference a couple years back. They're like the anti-Beren and Luthien story. There's a lot of parallels between the Aredhel and Eol story and the Beren and Luthien story, except it's the dark inverse version of that story.
And one of the things about her that's different from the others is she's vulnerable for just what you said, which is that she's frustrated that her vision and her mission and all of that. So she's like fertile ground for a being like Eol, who is able to then, mold himself just instinctively able to do it. It's not like he did it maliciously. He's not casting a spell on himself. He just kind of intuitively knows what she needs and provides it to her. So it's almost like it is the anti-Beren Luthien, or it is the because it's already grounded on neediness. It's like not a healthy base. It's not a healthy foundation to start with. But we don't necessarily know that to start out, right?
It's not obvious. It shouldn't scream out to us. Yeah,
no,
exactly. There's plenty of ways to make it look really attractive, right? He doesn't have to. We don't have to depict him as the creepy vampire-like dark elf lurking in the woods, and everyone's like, "No, don't go in there," right? He can be, tall, dark, handsome, and mysterious, right? There's no reason we can't do that. And you're right, Marie. We showed Galadriel in a bad place and Celeborn being a sympathetic, good listener. Absolutely. To show Eol similarly, the difference is going to be in the counsel that he gives, right? What is the place? Like, yes, we had in both cases, we had a strong-willed woman who was nevertheless at a point of crisis, right? And who, in that moment, in that vulnerable moment, in the midst of her crisis, encountered this man who was a sympathetic ear and listening and sensitive and a wise counselor, right? The chief difference between Eol and Celeborn there is where they are leading them, right?
I could see Eol being driven more by his own interests, his own personal, in other words, his motivation would color his counsel. You know what I'm saying? It's like Celeborn was, I don't want to use the word noble, but you know what I mean? He thought beyond himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somehow we can see Eol hints of, because we need to see some hints of this, right?
Absolutely.
Where he is.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately, that's going to be the obvious difference, right? Is that Eol is focused on himself, whereas Celeborn is genuinely selfless. I mean, he was focused on her and helping her, and the kind of risk that he put himself in, the way that he, even like put himself in a position where Thingol could plausibly accuse him of treason, right? For what he did, but he did that for her sake, right? He did that because he valued her more than he valued himself, right? And in Eol, we can show the opposite.
I gotta tell you, this is a terrible thing, but I've got the Gaston song now in my head. Eol makes me think of Gaston. So we got Belle and Gaston here, right?
Right. Yeah. Though actually, now that you raise Disney's Beauty and the Beast, like Belle in the Beast's castle, like does actually suggest some kind of parallels, doesn't it?
Yeah. She should pass a rose in a glass. Just we don't say anything. She just walks past it. Exactly, Brian. At the end of the day, that's what we will see, and what Aredhel will eventually see too, right? That fundamentally, as Brian is saying here, Eol is primarily aiming to possess Aredhel, while Celeborn is trying to help Galadriel achieve healing, right, and to strengthen her. Exactly, and that's where we can show the two really deviating. That really works. I think pretty clearly. But here's the other thing: what if Eol isn't just wicked? That is to say, I want him to be. I'm not trying to like make Eol into an awesome and positive exemplary character or anything. I'm not going too far with this, but I'm thinking about Mygwin, right? I'm wanting to bring the third, element into this situation, right? How do we want to play Mygwin? Margaret says, did that sword just move over there, Eol? Are your possessions enchanted, right? I was just having a conversation with your sword the other day, Eol. Be our guest.
It said some disturbing things. Yeah. Anyway, basically so there are a couple ideas that I'm toying with here. One is, if we show Eol to be the one who is like, narcissistic and possessive and dark, and that ultimately these sort of dark motivations which undermine any actual affection or whatever support that he actually gave to Aredhel, and so we have that it ends in a really bad place and she rejects that and leaves, and Mygwin is kind of in between the two of them, right? But I could also imagine kind of going another way. What if Mygwin is worse from the beginning? What if Eol has a lot of those issues? But what if Mygwin is manipulating things maliciously all along? Like, what if he's not so much to blame? What if Mygwin is the bigger villain of the two? I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with Mygwin's character exactly. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I was going to say, Stephen H. said this a little earlier in one of his comments, that Eol would look upon Myglin as a possession. And the type of psychology I'm thinking of Eol being would be like that. Now, that would have an impact on Myglin, because children, their relationship with their parents can be really impacted, and how their psychology ends up being,
right.
So I could see Eol not being necessarily wicked, but self-centered, narcissistic, of him, and the way he treats Myglin could have Myglin actually become manipulative, so it's not like Eol sets out to, or he's himself wicked to start with.
Right, exactly. Yes. Because I agree, Trish, that psychology would work if Eol is fundamentally the possessive narcissist, right? And Myglin would rebel against that. Myglin is himself a strong-willed person, and he would put himself in opposition to his father. I'm not your possession, you don't own me, right? That would be a very natural kind of... But of course, he also, like so many children, as my wife always says, you don't take after strangers, is also his father's son, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
and
that's
so
kind of what I was trying to get at.
That same kind of narcissism and possessiveness, it shows up in Myglin, but because of his rebellion against his father, it takes a different form. Eol is not ambitious, right? I mean, he's content to stay in Non-Elmoth indefinitely, right? All Eol wants is everybody else to leave him alone, right? All Eol wants is to not have anybody else mess with his stuff. So he is an inward-facing narcissist. Well, as all narcissists are, but I mean, as far as his possessiveness is concerned, right? Myglin wants more. Right, Myglin is not content to stay. Myglin feels constrained, right? And there, of course, we have the parallel between Aredhel Turgon and Myglin Eol, right? Where now it's Myglin who wants out, just like Aredhel wanted out. Not for the same reason, right? I'm not suggesting that the reasons for those are the same, but we have a parallel situation, right? But Myglin, he wants more, but he wants Gondolin, right? He is ambitious, and as soon as he's there in Gondolin, he's like, someday all of this will be mine.
Will be mine.
Right, yeah, exactly. And he, of course, his own attraction to Idril, as Tolkien implies in the text, is chiefly an objectification of her. Right?
Dynastic
she is a means to an
kind
end.
of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she is the... I mean, remember, Tolkien actively says that Myglin, when he's listening to her stories of Gondolin, is like, Mommy, tell me the part again about how Turgon has no heir, but only a marriageable daughter. Right? That's my favorite part of the story. Can you tell me that part again? Right? I mean, this is not even... it's his desire for Idril, at least initially, it's not even a kind of possessiveness. It's not even a kind of acquisitiveness. It's not even desire, like sexual desire. It's not even like, wow, she's hot and I want her. It's she's a means to an end, right? I have aims of I plan to become king, and she is the most obvious mechanism by which I can achieve that. In that sense, he's in love with her before he leaves Non-Elmoth, right?
I've got people quoting Disney songs now.
Rhiannon says that his Disney song is "I Just Can't Wait to Be King." Yeah,
and Chris says it's The Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so so we took a very Disney turn with this whole episode here.
But Disney's not getting this franchise. They may take over everything else. They may have Marvel. They may have Star Wars. They're not getting this one.
Right. Fair enough. Not yet. Anyway.
Not yet.
Not until they launch Disney Planet, as they suggest in Doctor Who. Anyway, so okay. But my question is still, what do we make of Maegwyn? Tolkien implies that there's something twisted in him, that he is just like he's a bad seed, right? Maegwyn is a bad seed. He is not a tragic fall kind of character. There's just there's something wrong with that guy from day one, right? Is what Tolkien suggests. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm kind of towing it. Another thing is I will admit, actually, I lump Maegwyn into the same category of insufficient payoff. Again, the emphasis on Maegwyn and the significance of Maegwyn's treachery. I mean, I'm not saying the fall of Gondolin isn't a big deal. It is a big deal. But in the published Silmarillion, it is way less of a big deal than it was in the older story. The fall of Gondolin is the end. Credits roll on, the first age of the elves in Middle-earth. Whereas in the published Silmarillion, Gondolin is one of the last and one of the greatest of the numerous collapses. It's like one in a series of collapses of elf kingdoms in Middle-earth, and it doesn't have the same kind of oomph. And again, to even I was joking with Trish about this before we started. Do I think Maegwyn deserves his own chapter in the Silmarillion? I'm not sure I'd give him his own chapter if it were me. Anyway, I don't know. As I say,
like you said, he's no worse than Caligorm or Curufin. They don't get their own chapters, right?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, there's sure, he's a villain. Sure, he does bad stuff. But again, yeah, lots of people do bad stuff, and they don't necessarily get the same kind of emphasis.
You know what? There's a spot for him on Arendel's ship.
Right. He could be cabin
with all the other.
He's that greasy-haired crew member nobody else wants to hang out with. Whom you're always hoping eventually is going to come to be accepted by everybody else, but he still keeps acting like such a jerk that in the end you're like, people are justified in not liking him, and yeah.
That's an interesting put. There are a whole bunch of characters like this that are where their reputation among fans of these stories far exceeds their actual role in them.
Yes, because Tolkien is so good at the untold story, right? It's suggesting the mythic significance of a story that he never narrates. Yes, exactly. Yeah. The Aredhel story being the biggest example. I mean, my goodness, the depiction of the Aredhel story, even his trip to Valinor and stuff, is so short. That is such a short treatment of that major moment, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. Anyway, okay. Exactly, Tony. It is a flaw in the annals style instead of heroic romance, the narrative choice that Tolkien started making back in the early 30s and chose to stick with when he returned to it after The Lord of the Rings, as we're talking about in our Morgoth's Ring discussion.
Well, I got to say, his lack of clarity in some areas has certainly paid many academic salaries over the years.
Hey, it's a wonderful, rich world, and the stories are so rich.
Really
Again, it's
open
not
to interpretation.
Yeah, none of those things that I'm complaining about amount to the Silmarillion sucks. Right? It's just saying the loss of what we don't have, and this is why my number one. Top of my list, and I've said this many times, if there were one unfinished work that Tolkien started and didn't finish in his life, and there's a whole bunch of them, but if there were one of them, if I could get my choice of one to, please resurrect Tolkien for the amount of time that it would take for him to finish this one thing, what would it be? It would be the Fall of Gondolin, the 1950s Fall of Gondolin, the one that's in Unfinished Tales, that stops as soon as Tuor arrives at the gates of Gondolin. Absolutely, that would be my choice of more than anything else. I'd choose it even over Aredhel. I can live with Aredhel as is because he's given me enough scope for imagination. But and actually, that phrase, which is very Anne Shirley, there's Anne of Green Gables phrase, scope for imagination. That, Dave, that's ultimately my answer to the question, right? Is that Tolkien is wonderful at telling stories that give scope for the imagination,
he really
even if
is.
he doesn't tell them, right?
Yeah, that's
he
true.
kind of took pride in that too, I think.
Yeah.
He was conscious of doing that.
Yeah. Okay, well...
But yeah, I mean, I think, the choice of the Valar alone not being very clearly laid out in the Aredhel story, as I say, has paid many an academic salary over the years.
Yeah, no, there's lots to talk about. It's very rich. It's delightful. Okay, so there's more that we can work out, much more that we need to work out about the character of Maeglin and, the whole sort of trajectory of the story.
Plus, Marie was asking how much of him are we going to see? Are we just going to see him in Nan Elmoth, or are we going to see him in Gondolin? That question is kind of still open, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, how much Gondolin we get is going to be a good question. I think I think that we need to be doing like Meanwhile in Gondolin, but we need to... At some point, we're going to need to stop. I'm not sure it's this season, though I'm quite sure it's not this day. We need to stop and think like big picture arc for Gondolin. Like what are some of the places where we need to make sure we're touching base with them, and mapping out that overall Turgon plot essentially. So one of
the things we didn't get to tonight that I think is also key is in the notes that Marie gave us is the midpoint. The key midpoint. Yeah. So that's something that's an open topic.
Yeah, let's start with that next time. I agree. I mean, the way that I was thinking last time was that I think it seems likely that we could have a chronological split, or manufacture, if we need to, a chronological split. With those, remember when we were talking about the human stories and the two different generations of men that we want to talk about the first generation, Beor and Haleth, right? And then the second, the later generation where we're getting Hurin and we're getting Barahir, right? And those guys, right? And Andreth, I would include, though we had talked about the possibility of having Andreth being a connector between the two of them, possibly. Or anyway, I don't know. We can that'll depend on how we do the chronology. But anyway, so if we do kind of divide it up into kind of two separate epochs like that, right? That's going to kind of determine where the hinge is. Do we have to resolve the Aredhel story this season? Does Aredhel have to die this season?
That's a good question.
I guess she does.
I would say, does she? I was going to say not necessarily, but...
I guess she does. I mean, we got to get her out of Nan Elmoth before the Dagor Bragollach, I suppose. Yeah. No, I guess we should. But I'm not sure which side of the line to put that in. We could contain the whole Aredhel Eol story in the first half of the season, for instance. But I don't know. I'm kind of thinking if we do have a little chronological jump in the middle of the season, then that would give Maeglin time to grow up, too.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, so... we'll start next session talking about trying to figure that out. Yeah. Let's figure that out. So Maria's quoting some dates here. Beor meeting Finrod in 310 and the battle in 455. Right. I mean, it gives us 145 years. If we have a gap in we can have some time passing in the first half and in the second half, and then a gap in the middle. That certainly gives a fine amount of time for Eol, or for Maeglin, to grow up. I was saying before, he only needs to be a moody elvish teenager by the time we get. I mean, I think we only need a minimum of. We were estimating last time, like 35 years or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But if we get more, that's totally fine with me, obviously. So anyway, we'll see. Next time we'll start looking at the detailed outline. episodes 1 through 13 and try to map out exactly how we'll lay out all of these things. We're going to have the return of our Gantt chart, I think, for the next session, as we're going to be trying to lay stuff out. So we'll come back to this here. My impulse right now is that Aredhel, I don't think I want to kill her off in the first half. I think having the dividing her story itself into two halves actually might be kind of interesting. The whole separating from Turgon and joining to Eol half, and then the birth of culminating in the birth of Maiglin, right? And then the whole Maiglin and I decide to leave, and then, you know, the now obviously emotionally and physically abusive husband shows up and tries to kill us both thing happen in the second half, basically.
In the second half, yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of right now where I would lean with that. I mean, I can see the death of Aredhel as an interesting sort of turning point, but it I don't know. I'm not sure. In the end, I'm not sure I like that. But anyway, we'll sort that out next time. It'll be easier to be able to try to decide this when we're laying things out a little bit more clearly. I kind of prefer... we do tend to have a pivot, and sometimes it's real obvious, like it was in Season 2. Like, the elves arriving in Valinor was our obvious pivot. But sometimes, to me, it's really more about seeing the whole scope of the shape and looking at what's there and saying, okay, like, given the story that is unfolding, where is like the pressure here? Where is the breaking point? Mm-hmm. Where is the turning point? And again, to me, I think it's going to be the it's going to have to do with the generations of men and with the change, with this theme of change that we've been talking about. So yes, Rhiannon, it could very well be Finrod's change of perspective.
I'd had the same thought as Rhiannon, which is the Athrobeth could be figure the pivot.
That'd be really interesting. To have that pivot point be Finrod's realization, right? That you know, it's not going to pan out the way that he thought, and that the world is not what he assumed it was going to be. Essentially,
right?
Big picture,
right?
Okay, awesome. Good work. We did a lot of stuff. It's getting late. We got to let folks sleep here. Those who are attending live. Thanks everybody, as always, for your suggestions and contributions. Could not do this without you. You guys are the ones who came up with all those theme ideas that we've been discussing, and it's fantastic. I never would have thought of that without your suggestions. Love the discussion that we've been having here. I think this is fantastic. So looking forward to next time. We'll be getting into the details and mapping stuff out here next time. So I'm excited about that. All right, thanks everybody. I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.
Yeah. You did some good work tonight.
Yeah, that was good.
Actually stuck it out. I'm really proud of myself.
You did.
I'm excited.
You did. Yeah, I
I'm
thought.
Excited about the.
Of course, I'll be falling asleep for tomorrow morning's podcast, but that's okay.
Right, exactly. Sorry, Dave. What were you saying?
I was just saying I'm excited for Sympathetic Eol.
Sympathetic Eol. Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
Exactly. I mean, I think it would be great to make him a character. I mean, he's going to go wrong. Like it's going to end badly. We know this. I'm not trying to save Eol's character, but wouldn't it be fun to have an Eol who they're like, at least for half the season there could be a Team Eol out there, right?
Right.
He could be somebody you cheer for. He could be somebody that he should be a tragic character, right? Somebody who could have done the right thing. Somebody who even almost did the right thing. Right, but in the end,
we've always been committed to not having Snidely Whiplash characters. Even Fëanor was sympathetic for quite a while. You know what I mean? It's like I think that's the right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right way to go.
I think that's great. All right, thanks everybody.
All right,
gonna say goodnight.
Good night,
bye everybody.
All right, bye everybody.
Be safe,
See you
everybody.
guys in 2 weeks. Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.